I'm also not from an NLU, and I got good marks. In interview also I've scored well. And those 3 months I used to study for maybe 10 to 12 hours, because you have to put in that number of hours, in those 3 months. This is and for anyone who has cleared prelims this year, I would say please work very very hard and make the most of this opportunity, because it may not come back again. And what I used to do is I used to go through the topic wise previous year questions, which Law Experts has. It has very beautifully compiled all the previous year questions.
Welcome to Law Experts MV India Toppers Talk. Today we have Ms. Jayasree Pradhan, who has secured AR 52 with UPSC Law Optional, which is a very notable thing. So, a hearty congratulations from Law Experts. Welcome, Ms. Jayasree.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. The first question is like from your score per se. You have scored 288 in UPSC Law Optional, one of the best scores. So many people ask me whether Law Optional is a good scoring subject. So what would be your answer for that?
I think any optional, if you study good enough for it, it will be a good scoring subject. So, number one, you should not have such fears, whether it is scoring, not scoring, and all that. Secondly, I think that law option is a very safe subject, in the sense that other subjects, other optionals, sometimes they have a lot of drastic changes. Sometimes you get a lot of high marks, or sometimes you get low marks. But when it comes to law optional, it is a very stable and safe subject. And I think there's a lot of pass percentage when it comes to law optional people. People with law optional people generally they make it through. So I think it's a very safe subject to pick. And not only is it helpful in your optional, it's helpful across all the papers. It is not only helpful in GS2. GS2 definitely is helpful. It is also helpful in GS1, the society part. And GS3 also, you can put in some elements, especially in the environment aspect. You can put in the environmental law aspect. Again, in GS4 also, in certain case studies, you can implement it, because I also had, quoted some certain sections, especially this year, when there was this question on consent, where you had to do some blood, you were placed in a particular position and you had to do some blood transfusion in that particular case study. And I remember I had quoted section 94 of IPC, the general exceptions. And I stated that, this section, it allows you to do certain things, for the person's benefit without consent. So law, that gives you an edge over the other people. So it is not only helpful in your option, it's also helpful in your GS subjects, it's also helpful in your essay. So I think in that sense, law optional does have a lot of benefits.
Good. Awesome. A reliable option with a lot of benefits. Well said. Okay. So, like when people are starting with any preparation, they'll have a lot of self doubts. So, as a person starting with UPSC law optional preparation, what one must do?
So the first thing you must do if you're starting your preparation is you must have a downloaded copy of the syllabus. Now, if you look at the syllabus of law, it is very vast. It is very vast, but it is very, very detailed. And that's the beauty of law optional, in my opinion, because it is so detailed, you won't have questions that will come out of the syllabus. So whatever is there in the syllabus, those are the questions that are going to come. So we have to make the most of it. So we need to know the syllabus by heart. We need to know the syllabus in and out. So number one is have a copy of the syllabus at all times. Number two, identify your sources and everything. Number three, very important to go through the previous year questions, because I've also gotten a lot of questions in terms of, it's so vast. How do you even navigate it? How do you even complete those topics? When you do navigate those topics, by first understanding the themes, the broad themes on which UPSC keeps asking questions. So syllabus and your previous year questions should have to be at your fingertips, especially when you're starting your preparation. This will put you on the right track.
Okay, so good, so good. So, regarding the sources that helped you during the preparation, would you like to share them?
Yes, ma'am. So for me, I used to refer to books itself, the proper books that I referred to in college only. So for constitution law, I referred to J.N. Pandey and D.D. Basu. For international law, I referred to S.K. Kapoor, and for administrative law, I.P. Messi. And for IPC, I referred to Ratan Lal. And then after that, for torts and contracts, R.K. Bangia. And then after that, for CLD, a lot of my college notes as well as internet. So those were my sources.
Awesome, awesome. And you mentioned about previous year questions. We have to know that to know and
Yes.
track, right? So, like, I remember you purchasing the previous year questions from law experts. Like, I saw that. Is it like correct?
Yes, ma'am. So,
Yeah.
ma'am, my entire strategy, if I can I just delve into my entire year strategy?
definitely you can.
Yes.
Please do.
So when I was preparing throughout the year, so I started my preparation from July. July after my first attempt. My first attempt I gave it in 2022, right after my graduation. So I had not done a lot of preparation for my first attempt. I had just given it, with like a few months of preparation, and I did not clear prelims, which is fair because I'm not prepared for it. So this was my proper serious attempt. And in this attempt, I started my preparation from July. So from July to December, the way I focus on law optional is I used to pick a subject and I used to do it per week. Say constitutional law per 1 week and then international law the second week, so on and so forth. The way I used to do it is by referring to previous year questions. So previous year questions was my guide. It was my source, you could say that. And what I used to do is I used to go through the topic wise previous year questions, which Law Experts has. It has very beautifully compiled all the previous year questions with the marks, and in which year it was asked. And the beauty, I think, of this Law Experts previous year questions is that they also mention the year in which they have asked these questions. So it's not just, giving you a question, it's also the year and the marks. So what happens is you tend to see a pattern in this year. If they've asked a question, then in how many years the same question is getting repeated. So I used to have these and I used to follow it very diligently. So whenever I'm picking up a topic and whenever I'm doing something, I would make sure I would go through the previous year questions that Law Experts had compiled. And then I used to make model answers of them. So I used to make model answers of them, and this was my preparation throughout the year. So throughout the year, from July to December, what I've done is I've sat and I've made model answers for it. And I used to I used to 60% 60% of the time to GS, 40% of the time to optional. In that 40% of the time per day, every day I used to study optional. In that 40% time, I used to go through the previous year questions, make notes out of it, and do answer writing practice. Because I had graduated in my graduation, I had law itself. So I started my law answer writing right from July. So I used to write answers. I used to write those model answers. It was based on previous year questions. And I also used to refer to the toppers copies, which is available for free. It's uploaded in Law Experts has toppers copies. So I used to refer to them to get some sort of idea on how to write answers. So this is what I did throughout the year.
So nice, well planned strategy. Nice. Okay. So this was year long. But what was your strategy like from between prelims to mains that time?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I think that is the most crucial period. Honestly, it will be a make or break. And speaking for myself, I am somebody who was very scared of prelims. So throughout the year, I gave a little more emphasis on GS. But after that, on GS and on prelim specific GS. But then once I cleared prelims, I realized I'm not I'm not 100% prepared for mains. There are lots of topics I still have to cover. So for me, those 3 months were the months that got me to this point. So I really worked very hard in those 3 months, and I worked very hard for optional as well. So in those 3 months, I used to study for maybe 10 to 12 hours, because you have to put in that number of hours, in those 3 months. And for anyone who has cleared prelims this year, I would say, please work very, very hard and make the most of this opportunity, because it may not come back again. So I used to study, say, for 10 to 12 hours. And from those 10 to 12 hours, I used to give around 5 to 6 hours for optional every day. So for every day for 3 months, I used to give 5 to 6 hours for optional. And ma'am, I would like to thank Law Experts for it, because I remember I had subscribed to the test series of Law Experts. Now, giving the test is another thing, but I had subscribed to the test series, and Law Experts has this schedule, day-to-day schedule, where they complete the entire syllabus in 60 days. And I had a printout. I took a printout of this schedule, and I had it in my laptop as well. So every day I would know that today I have to complete this topic, tomorrow I have to do this topic, which Law Experts has planned out for me. So every day I would sit with that topic for 5 to 6 hours. And in that 5 to 6 hours, what I used to do is I used to go through the compiled previous year questions. Again, write answers for them. I used to practice a lot. 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 And maybe for 3 to 4 hours, I would complete that topic which Law Experts has given me. And then in the remaining 2 hours, I would go through all the previous year questions, even the questions that have not been, say, I would do every day I would do a different year. So this year, today, if I'm doing 2023, tomorrow I'll do 2022. Next day, 2021, like that. So in that way, this is what I did for, the 3 months. In 60 days, I could complete the entire syllabus because of Law Experts and the way they had planned it out. And after that, I went on to specific revision for the remaining 1 month.
Awesome. Very nice. Yeah, plan makes everything work out. And sticking to that plan is the greatest thing, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, talking about mains, it is all about GS and law option. So, how did you balance both?
So, ma'am, the way I balanced, both GS and law optional is before prelims, especially the year-long strategy, I used to say give about 60% of time to GS. So, because I'm somebody who was more scared of prelims than I was of mains, so I used to give 60% of time to GS, and the remaining 40% of the time to optional. So I used to do two subjects in one day, one GS subject, one optional subject. So in that optional subject, 40% of the time I would make sure to do the previous year questions. And again, after prelims got over, then I gave more time to optional. So around 60% of the time to optional and then the remaining 40% to GS. So again, in those 3 months also, every day I used to do optional and GS both. So 5 to 6 hours for optional and maybe 3 to 4 hours for GS and maybe 1 or 2 hours for current affairs. And current affairs also included law, because not only do you have to read news, I also used to read live law diligently, and I used to make notes of any important cases that came up.
Awesome. Live law is awesome. It has become a very good platform for everyone. Very
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Nice. And then, talking about test series, importance of taking tests. What is your opinion on that?
Ma'am, I think it is very important to take tests. So the thing is, it is my one regret. It's my one regret that I did not write a lot of tests. I practiced a lot, no doubt about it. I practiced a lot. I used to write a lot of answers every day. I used to write answers. In fact, from July till December, I wrote answers every day, and even during prelims and mains, I wrote a lot of answers. But the problem is, I had a lot of fear. I felt very scared of writing tests. I don't know for what reason. I don't know why I used to feel so scared of giving tests. And I never gave tests, and I actually suffered because of it. Because, ma'am, I'll tell you, in paper one of my optional, I got 131 marks. In paper two, I got 157. I'm told that 157 is one of the highest marks in the past few years that anyone has ever gotten. But in paper one, I think I feel like I had the potential to get much better marks than 131 is a decent score. It's a good score, but I had a potential to get more. I feel that because I've not given tests, I made a mistake in selecting the question. So I selected the wrong question, and then I had to cut out that question and I had to attempt a different question, which cost me time in the exam hall. So I think that decision of not giving tests, at least a few full length tests you have to give. I regret not doing that. For people who are writing this year's mains, please give tests. It's very, very important.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. Okay. Now, yeah, talking about revision notes. How did you prepare revision notes and how useful was that?
So, ma'am, I told about my main strategy. In between prelims and mains, what I used to do is I used to sit with these previous year questions and I used to make notes. I should practice, not making notes. I did before prelims. In between prelims and mains, I focus on answer writing. And what I used to do is for the first 60 days, I did whatever the schedule had told me to do. After that, I've made revision notes. So, ma'am, I have got my notes with me just to show a sample. So this is how I made these notes. It's in very compact format. It's like a very compact format. This is how I made these notes. So the way I used to do it is go through the previous year questions. So every day I sit with for 3 hours. I used to sit with a previous year question, and I used to write the answer, just the skeleton, just the keywords, just the basic case laws, just the basic quotes that I would like to mention, the basic sections I would like to mention, and those were my revision notes. And this is what I compiled. And this is how I used to revise. So this I did in August, which is the last month, September, the last 30 days of the exam. And I think this was very, very useful for me because one day before the exam, you cannot revise those bulky notes. You need to have few specific revision notes that you have to revise over and over again. And this is what's going to help you one day before the exam. So I would recommend you all to make revision notes as well. It's incredibly useful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well said. Because those bulky notes, what we make out of interest, that won't come handy when you have the exam the next day, all six subjects,
Yes.
right? Yes, exactly. Okay. Then, what was your strategy in paper one?
So, ma'am, my strategy in paper one was because paper one, I think, is an easier in a way, and it's an easier paper than paper two, because paper two it has a lot of content. Paper one is where you can really do well. There's a lot of philosophical aspects to it also. So in paper one, what I did is I made a collection of, say, quotes of judges, certain judgments that I liked. So I could quote them in my answers. Similarly, for international law, I made sure that I had certain diagrams, especially in law of the seas and all of that. So those diagrams would come in handy for me. So because paper one is more predictable, you have to make the most out of it, and you can also beautify your answers by adding those philosophical aspects like the judgments and the case laws, the quotes, everything. It really helps. So that was my broad strategy. I also had these current affairs that I used to collect. So a lot of people have asked me, how did you do current affairs along with, the vastness of the subject that is there? So what I used to do is I used to follow live law diligently, and if there's any new case law that has come up, I used to compile that in my constitutional law notes. For instance, I have it here. So this is my constitutional law. This is my current affairs. So I have put constitutional law, and these are all the recent case laws of that year, which I have printed copies of it. So I made sure I printed it out, and I used to revise this every day so that I could include it in my answers in the actual exam hall. So for my paper one strategy, it was doing these static subjects well, and also trying to beautify my answers by putting some philosophical quotes or current affairs. That's very important. So this is what I did. And
Well
ma'am, I
said.
also
Well,
just want to say one more thing, that in international law, there are certain topics that a lot of people leave out. Like WTO or the nuclear doctrines. People don't feel like studying those things. The environmental law also, the international environmental aspect. Many people I have noticed, they don't do it. They think that it is very unpredictable, and other things like state recognition and all of that is more useful, is what they feel. I would tell you, please don't ignore those topics. Even if you do it, like, just do it so that you don't regret it. And for me this year, I attempted the WTO question. And I think sometimes it gives you an edge over the others, because when you attempt something that is not attempted by everybody else, you do something different, is I think is also interesting for the examiner to read. So don't leave out those topics. I would just like to say that when it comes to international law.
that is an awesome thing because you have to show where you stand out than the other person who's writing means, right?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome, right. Okay. And following question. What would be your strategy for paper two?
So, ma'am, because paper two is a very lengthy topic, it's a very lengthy paper, and there's so much to do in paper two. So I focus a lot on IPC, the law of crimes and torts. So I had made up my mind that I am going to two questions that I have to attempt. I will do it from section A, which
Hmm.
means that I had to do law of crimes and torts without fail. I had to do it very, very well, even including those topics which is slightly not part of the core IPC. Those Prevention of Corruption Act and the Atrocities Act, the SCST Act, the Protection of Civil Rights Act. All of those acts also I made sure I did very well, so that if there was a question, I would not have to leave it, and I would not have to attempt the section B questions, which is a bit more unpredictable. So my strategy for paper two included that I will do the law of crimes and law of torts extremely well, all the topics mentioned in the syllabus, so that I don't miss out on it. And I'm very glad I did that, because this year in section A there was a question on the Atrocities Act, and because I'd done that act also quite well, I could answer it. I'm very satisfied with that answer. I think that is what also gave me an edge. I have scored very well in paper two. So I think those things really helped me in my actual scoring of the marks. And I've also been asked this question, by certain students. How do you prepare for these miscellaneous topics, and to what depth do you do these different acts? So I would just say, for just to answer those questions, those different acts that I mentioned in paper two, what you do is you go through the previous year questions, you see the recurring themes, you make notes out of it, and apart from that, just to be on the safer side, you go through the entire act in general, and just go through the main headings, the basic sections and the headings. So just keep a note out of it. Just remember those, and see if there's any recent case law that has happened. Because usually when something like that happens, whenever there is a question that comes, usually it's because of some recent event. And ma'am, I remember that in that Atrocities Act, I had mentioned the Manipur case. that had happened, because it was sort of
Smart.
related. It was sort of related with the scheduled trade and the atrocities that happened. So relate current affairs with the act that is there, because if they are asking something, something would have happened. And so try to be very much in touch with the news, not just case laws, but also what is happening generally around you. So paper 2, my strategy was doing law of crimes and torts really well. And for the others also, I made sure that even the CLD and all the other topics, I made sure I had at least completed it once, like just even if it's a brief overview. So I made sure I would do that.
Okay, smart move actually done. Okay, talking about CLD, like CLD, each topic is a subject in itself. So how did you compact that?
Ma'am, so for me, CLD, thankfully, I had some college notes for IP and intellectual property and arbitration. So I just referred to my college notes, and if the cyber laws and other things which was not there, in detail, the only thing I did, ma'am, I just went with previous year questions because that's the most I could do. I don't think a lot of people can go beyond that. Like, it's very vast. Of course, you have to stay abreast with current affairs. So for CLD, I would say go through your basic notes, go through the previous year questions, and number three, just stay abreast of the current affairs. Because if there's some current things in the news, then it might be important. For instance, if IT law is you keep seeing you keep seeing IT laws being mentioned, then it might come. So make sure that you're aware of the current affairs, so you can be in touch with CLD. Otherwise, don't stress so much about it, because I think all of us are on the same boat when it comes to CLD. All of us find it incredibly challenging. The best you can do is at least do the basics and not leave out any topic.
Pretty decent, pretty decent. So, like, most important thing, like, we have done so much, and the exam day is here now. So, what was your exam day experience, and any few tips that you can give to the aspirants?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, I would say that I had a lot of fear for optional. I was very, I think, out of all the papers, I was most flustered for optional. Before the exam, I could not even sleep very well, and I went, and I already told about how I made a mistake in the first paper, in the selection of questions. And then the second paper was better because my father, after my paper one, he calmed me down and he said, "It's all right. Forget about paper one. You do paper two well." So I went with a calm mindset in paper two, which really helped me, and it's reflected in my scores also. I got good marks in paper two. So my exam day experience was that I was a bit flustered, especially in the beginning, but then I calmed down towards paper two. So my advice for people writing this year's mains is to not be flustered. You have done your best. You have studied all that you could. Now, the only thing you must do after GS4, take some rest, please. I remember I did not even take rest. I took a cab back to my hotel, and even in the cab, I was reading. Don't do that. Like, you can just take some rest for 20 minutes, take some rest, 20, 30 minutes. You can even take a nap. Go through your revision notes very calmly. Take a good night's sleep, get up, have a good light breakfast, and then be very calm in the exam hall. When you get the paper, select your questions very, very carefully. So in your mind, you would have a preconceived notion that you might select two questions from this section, two questions from that section. See if it aligns, but if you have to make on the spot decision, then don't get flustered. That's all right. A lot of people will have to do that. So be very calm. That's the only advice I would give. Be very calm and be very confident while writing the paper.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, mindset works a lot. The mindset, the preparation, everything should work hand in hand, right? Exactly. And when we are talking about your interview, like, see, interview and law optional, how many questions were there from law optional? What were the questions in interview from law optional?
Ma'am, I think that law optional is very helpful for people giving the interview, because everybody has an interest in law. And I think regardless of your background, you might get a few questions on law. So yeah, and especially if your optional itself is law, then it might you may get asked a lot of questions. For me personally, I was asked a lot of questions on international law and the nuclear weapons and all of that, because my first preference is the Indian Foreign Service. And because my Indian Foreign Service plus my optional is law, so I got asked a lot of questions on international law, and I'm very glad that I could answer those questions well, at least. For people who have law optional and who are preparing for the interview, I would just say form a group, because law is constantly there in the news in some way or the other. It's constantly there in the news. Form a group of people who are giving the interview who also have law optional. I had formed a group. There were 6 people in that group, and 3 of us cleared this exam. including rank 7 and me, I'm rank 52 and
Anmol.
rank 372. Yes, Anmol, me and one more girl, Manika, three of us we cleared this year, and we were all in the same group. So we used to discuss together. So what I would say is form a group during that interview phase. Find some people, through Telegram or whatever it is, find people who are also giving the interview with law optional. And once you have that group, discuss only law related aspects from the interview perspective daily. This is really going to help. I really am so grateful for that group, because law seemed so vast, especially during the interview phase, and you get so scared during interview, what are they going to ask me, especially from law. But when you have that group, you can help each other. So I'm really grateful for that group. So for people giving interview with law optional, please find people with similar law optional background so that you can help each other during the interview process.
Good, good, awesome. And finally, any good tips and advices you would like to give to the aspirants if you
Ma'am, the first tip that I would give is with respect to the mental aspect. The
can?
mindset that you must carry when you are writing this exam with this optional. Number one, do not have this preconceived notion that law is a very low scoring optional and I might not do well, this, that. This is a very fear based approach. This will not help you in this preparation strategy, because constantly you'll be worrying about whether you get marks or not, and this is not going to help you. So once you've decided that you're going to take up law, do it well, do it with interest, and you will get good marks if you study quite well and if you study in a structured manner. So just be rest assured that you are doing your best, and forget about the marking system and forget about this, that. Don't have this fear-based mindsets when it comes to the optional, because I've seen that a lot of people have a lot of fears with respect to optional. Number two is, again, coming to the mindset itself. Some people have this mindset that okay, I didn't have law as my graduation subject, so should I take up law as an optional? Or I'm not from an NLU or whatever it is. Don't have that mindset either. I'm also not from an NLU, and I got good marks. In interview also I've scored well, and in optional also I scored well. In both of them I've scored well. So don't have that preconceived notions and all of that. So mindset is very important. So have a very positive mindset when it comes to law optional. That is one advice, very important advice that I'd like to give you. And the second advice I would like to give is, even though the law optional seems very, very vast, it is doable. It is doable. It is because it is very well defined. What you need is proper analysis of previous questions and proper practice. Keep practicing those questions and make sure you keep in touch with current affairs, not just recent cases, but what is happening around you. So you can include that in your answers. So in that way, you'll be able to score well in your option.